I'm going to pass it on over to Cam from our Rocket Reach team, and he's going to take us through the rest of the day. Really looking forward to this one.
Thank you so much, Tess. First and foremost, I'm thrilled and humbled that I was asked to moderate this amazing panel, and a sincere thank you to everyone, wherever you are, joining us today. We had a ton of folks register for this webinar, which lets us know this is an important subject that is top of mind for a lot of people. So we're going to have a hard-hitting conversation on how you can avoid slumps and continue to thrive in sales, even as the market nears closer and closer to an anticipated recession. I'm Cam Ali. I'm a strategic enterprise AE here at Rocket Reach. I'm a huge Jay-Z and Lewis Hamilton fan, and I've been in SaaS now for 6 years, which is a very small fraction of experience in comparison to my guests joining me here right now. But enough from me. We do have two incredible folks with us today, so I'm going to kick it off and have both of our guests introduce themselves and talk a little bit more about their sales journey and how they got to where they are today. Liz, you want to kick us off, then we'll popcorn on over to KD?
Sure. Hey, Kim. Thanks, Tess. Hey, everyone joining us. I'm Liz J. Simpson. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. Man, I've been in sales for a long time. One of those people who did not plan for it, but I stumbled into it. So everything from call center sales at my college, selling to alumni, to door-to-door, to call center sales, to managing retail territories, to outpatient medical sales, to life and health insurance, to SaaS. Into consulting. So I've seen like so many different realms of sales in my career. I was a single mother, so sales was a lifesaver for me. It was one place that I could go and I could create my income through my performance and how I manage myself. So I'm a huge sales advocate, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all today.
Thanks, Liz.
On my sign. I didn't know if you're supposed to hit me up. Go through it.
You have Kevin.
All right. Liz, is this the first time we've been on one of these together, Liz?
I think it is. I was trying to process. I'm like, I've seen you through LinkedIn, but I think it's our first time.
Yeah, it's like we've danced around it for the longest time. So I'm pumped to be here with you. So KD, Kevin Dorsey, everyone calls me KD unless I go too far, then call me Kevin. Then I know I crossed the line somewhere. But have, been in sales for 15, 16 years now. I've been leading sales orgs for the past 10 years, and really like about scaling and building out the systems and processes to do it. I've got a couple unicorns under the belt now, although I'm waiting for my unicorn patch or trophy in the mail, and it still hasn't shown up, which makes it all not worth it. But a big focus of mine as a leader has been about focusing on the person in salesperson. Right. And I think a lot of that gets lost in translation. It gets lost in the day to day. And hopefully that's something we can bring to this conversation is like, I have this weird belief that if we took care of the person in salesperson, the sales would also improve. So I'm pumped to dive in here and also be on here with one of my mentees, Cam, to see him coming up and through the game here, which is fun. So let's do this, y'all. Let's get into it.
It's always a good time. And as you can see, based on accomplishments, Rock Nation is in the building. We actually do have Jay-Z and Rihanna here with us today. So kudos. But before we get started, I'd like to ask you both a question that might be personal to you. For all of us who have been in sales or just getting started, what is the most powerful piece of advice you have ever received and how did it affect you? Katie, you want to take this first?
Sure. So I'd say, man, I mean, you also know me. Giving one might be tough. But I'll give two here. One was just understand the prospect. Like understand the prospect. So much in sales is about knowing the product or knowing the sales process. Get to know the prospect better than they know themselves. And that means the industry, their day-to-day, what they do, which is weird for a lot of salespeople. We don't even use the product that we sell. So how on earth can we actually convey it the right way? So it's really about knowing the prospect, study people. How we make decisions, how emotions rule us, right? How do buyers buy? Like really focusing there is the big tip. The second was just consistency. Like avoid the peaks and valleys of like 500 calls these days, 0 this day. Like do the same things day in and day out over time. Be okay with the boring. Be okay with the minutia because it's doing the boring things day in and day out that leads to the exciting things. And so I think that was the other big one for me is a lot of us in sales, we tend to be all or nothing, right? Like we go, and then we stop. Consistency, 95% every single day versus 120, 10, 30 and all that. So those are my big two, man. Study people and the prospect and be consistent day in and day out.
No, absolutely. Those are two very good points. I mean, without consistency, you'd probably just burn yourself out in the day-to-day when you get hung up. Liz, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I want to underscore both of those. Like, if you can study and understand the world of your buyer better than they understand it, and then be consistent in action, like, you're good. Like, check out, we're done, we've done our part here today. For me, if you say like personal story, I do remember a time that I was in a sales slump and I was questioning myself. My confidence was shot, and I'll never forget. It was I don't even know his role. He was like SVP. So he was like my leader's leader that I rarely ever saw. And he was one of those few people I only saw like annual sales or during my interview process. And I'll never forget, I was in field sales at the time and he was in the office and I was just talking to him. He's like, "What's going on?" And one thing he said to me, he's like, "There's certain people that when I'm hiring them, I'm not sure what's going to happen." But he said, "When I was interviewing you, I knew you were a sure bet." And I don't like, for me, one shift that's been for me is like, in sales, know that you are complete. Like, you are whole. You're good as you are. I think too often in sales, it's like, how can I change? What am I doing? And there's a lot of skill set. Like, you're working on yourself. You're continually evolving every single day in sales. But I think for me, the best advice was like, I'm complete as I am, right? And so it's, how do I create incremental changes and evolve daily? But you have to inherently believe that you are good as a person. And I think from there, like, and I know, like, I'll get really like touchy feely. Like, you have to be solid, believe in yourself, have total confidence that who you are as a person, you can bring it to the table. And then from there, when you have challenges or roadblocks, it's not like, oh shit, let me pack it up and leave sales. It's like, yo, I'm good. Let me inspect what's going on. What have been my behaviors this past week? What's happening in the market? And how do I focus on a growth mindset and evolving? So for me, the best advice was like, I am, and I just need to focus on incremental changes.
Gotcha. So it sounds like, I mean, like everyone, you experience a slump at some point in time, but that's really the point where you really need to double down on yourself and double down on your confidence and know what you bring to the table and really go twice as hard just so you can achieve those goals. But that's a good segue because right now, speaking of slumps, stocks are down, inflation is sky high, home prices are now on decline, layoffs are on the rise. You will both experience sales and business leaders and see a lot when it comes to the sales profession. That being said, do you think we are in a recession? And if so, how do you think that is affecting businesses and sales? If not, how is it affecting them? Liz, you want to kick off this one?
I do. Okay. All right. So I'm going to be honest. I'm going to keep it a buck for
Please do. That's all I asked for. 1,000.
Oh man. I don't worry about them type of things. Like, I'm gonna keep it a buck. So,
Okay.
all right. So here's where I focus. One of the reasons why I love sales is because there is not an economy where a salesperson is not going to be able to eat. Like, sales is the one thing. If the economy's up or down, people are going to need help with their services. Now, absolutely. Are there going to be times where people are losing jobs and things like that? Yes. I'm just the personality type that I feel like what you focus on is what what shows up for you. I've always focused on, how do I improve my craft? How do I be the best? Where are the opportunities that exist? And I focus there. So I kind of have tunnel vision, if I'm being really honest. Like, that's been a part of my success for me, is I focus on those things. Now, what I do think we need to focus on is your industry, your market, the realm that you play in. And to Katie's point, like, understanding the world of your buyer. So I would be more obsessed with, for my buyer, how are the changes in the world impacting my buyer? But for me, the reason why I'm like, I don't get all caught up in that is I'm obsessed in the world of my buyer every day. So like, it's not like, oh, there's an obsession. I mean, there's a recession now, what's going on with my buyer? I'm like, I'm always obsessed with what's happening in the world of my buyer. How do I be a value add? How's that going to impact their decision making? How do we innovate? How do we rethink our offerings? How do I rethink my positioning and my conversation? So for me, it's kind of like, opportunities are going to exist. It's good to know what's going on in the market, but that doesn't change much of how I show up unless it's impacting my buyer.
Got it. So essentially, it's a constant process of staying on top of the client, not just when the market is potentially on fire, now is the time to say, okay, let me give all my attention and resources to focus on what may or may not be happening with the client.
Yeah, and I'm also an entrepreneur. See, I think different. Like when everyone's yelling fire, I'm running in. Like I'm like, oh, this is the time for me to go into the market. Like while everybody's running away with doomsday, I'm like, yo, this is where opportunities, like my greatest acceleration and my quantum leap in my career has been when the narrative is all is down and I'm doubling down finding opportunity. So I'm just like, look, be the opposite, right? Don't follow the status quo. That's me.
Don't hear fire sale. KD, how about you, man? How talk to us.
The question, are we in a recession? Technical definition is 6 months of consecutive economic drawback. We've been in there. So technically, yes, whatever, right? To Liz's point though, right? It's funny because like listening to Liz, she's saying two things at the same time here, right? So there's how we face it and how our buyer faces it, right? Because it doesn't matter what we believe. It matters what our buyer believes. And if the buyer believes we're in a recession, that changes how we have to approach them, right? So as much as like Liz J, right, she runs into fire. That's why she's one of the best in the game. That doesn't necessarily represent all of our buyers. And so if you approach a buyer who is afraid with a do not be afraid mindset, you're actually going to be in conflict, right? It'd be very similar to like me and my wife were in an argument and I say, calm down. That's not going to play out very well, regardless of what I believe. But what she did say there, though, too, is like understanding how the recession or whatever you want to call it, the market is impacting your buyer. Because for some buyers, they do have to pull back. That's how the recession is affecting them. And you have to change your messaging accordingly, right? So everyone here is like, why is your product a must-have in an economic, I just combined two words, economic downturn, but someone write down economic because that's going to become a thing, right? Have you ever taken the moment to sit down and go, why is my product a must-have? Because things are bad. Take a second to think about that. Things are tough out there. Why must you have my product? Because things are tough. The objection becomes the reason. So do I believe we are in a recession? Yes. Has there been pullback? Yes, that's all true. It'd be ignorant of me to say it's not. Layoffs are happening, but you have to pay attention. What is that causing for my buyer's world? And then you adjust your messaging accordingly, right? Because it doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what my buyer believes. And that's where I have to focus.
And that's some great feedback. So usually people come into the office and they got a ton of opinions from the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or the Economist, and they got all these ideas. And what you're saying is, keep it simple, man.
It is, but also too, like it's paying attention, right? What is like the overall feel on our economy right now? Positive or negative? What is the overall macro trend and emotion of our economy? It's not positive. It's neutral at best, but pretty openly, if you went and polled 100 people, said, how's our economy doing right now? They'd be like, right? Groceries up, gas up, home price, like that is the reality. And so to ignore the reality of what that does to people emotionally is a problem. You need to think about, okay, we talk about the 4 F's of fear, right? The 4 F's of fear. Fight, everyone knows that one. Flight, everyone knows that one. It's actually the 2 other F's that actually happen more often than not with fear, which is freeze and faint. Most of our buyers right now are in freeze mode. They're afraid, so they're frozen. We need to get them away from that fear for them to take action. And you combat the fear of emotion with the emotion of confidence, not with ROI, not with logic, right? You have to combat emotion with emotion. And that's what selling is all about.
Well, let's unpack that for a second, getting people away from fear and then comparing that to today's market. Everyone's a self-proclaimed expert online nowadays, but you yourself have successfully designed and implemented numerous processes. What are your recommended top sales tactics for ensuring sales teams actually meet their quota for the remainder of the year and so on?
How much time do we have? Shoot, right? Like, we can go all day on that. At the end of the day, it's nailing the prospect's problems, understanding what they want to achieve by solving those problems, reaching out to enough to and consistently to the right types of prospect and leading with that messaging, right? People buy things to solve problems. That's it. Everything you have ever bought has been to solve some type of problem. You buy a Big Mac because you're hungry. You buy a bag because you want it and it'll look good on your shoulder and you don't have it. Someone else has it and you want it. You buy a car because you got to get to work. Everything that we buy is to solve a certain problem. If we can identify the problems that our prospects are having, we have to connect the dots to it, right? This is why, like, I spend most of my training, most of my coaching, even most of my processes around helping my reps understand the problems of the buyer. The product becomes simple after that because the product simply solves those problems. That's the way that it works. So that's the core of it. That's the core, is understanding the problems, leading with and finding those out, then discovering the better future that the prospect wants, but then putting in the consistency, the touches, the calls, the emails, the videos, not only in prospecting, but in the sales process and post, right? Talking to customers, which I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit, but that's the core of it, man. That really is. Like, it's simple, but it's not easy.
No, absolutely. And it sounds like that's the recipe. And what a lot of people confuse is they may hear those things and they're like, yeah, I can nail the problems. I can understand what they want to achieve. I've been reaching out enough and consistently, but are you leading with the messaging, or have you doing other things and you actually nailing the problem?
Okay. So classic. Actually, we'll do this. We'll do this live. Anyone that wants to, put in the problem you solve in the chat. Let's blow up the chat. Put in the problem your product solves in the chat. Let's see what pops up here. Because generally, I think I know what's about to happen here. What problem does your product solve? Throw it in the chat. You're gonna get some real feedback from me and Liz J. Which also is one up to me because I'm KD, but you're always Liz J Simpson. You get the triple letter, you get the triple name, which, like, I want the triple name. I just can't pull it off. Right?
Yeah, there's emphasis on the J.
All right, the J. Okay, so solve high energy usage, right? Managing unstructured documents, selling more tickets. See if a few more come in here, but you'll see what I'm about to talk about. Is most of these are actually benefits. They're not the problem that it solves. Increasing revenue. What's the opposite of increasing revenue? Not enough revenue. Managing unstructured documents at scale. The problem that solves is disorganized documents and lost data, right? Like, it's things like that. You flip the language into the problem. So often we lead with benefits and we wonder why it doesn't connect. Whereas hiring manager satisfaction, flip it, right? Dissatisfied managers taking too long to hire, candidates ghosting is a problem. And if you can connect the dots on that, what's the problem with candidates ghosting? Not hitting your headcount numbers. What's the problem with not hitting your headcount numbers? Not hitting your revenue numbers. What's the problem with not hitting your Now we're getting into the actual things that we solve. So that's the flip, y'all. All the benefits, flip it to the opposite. Those are the problems you solve. That's what connects with people on a real level.
Amazing. Amazing. Thanks for the live breakdown. I'm sure the audience is very appreciative of it. Let's pivot on over to Liz. I recently watched a video you posted about a question you get asked often. How do I close more sales? Aside from your ability to pick an amazing intro song, Guapale, A1 choice, by the way, what are some of your top tips for our viewers?
Oh man, closing more sales. It's one of those things that feels difficult to start with because it starts in the beginning, right? It starts with the conversation and it ties directly to what Katie just did. And I love that you did that because I do in lives all the time. And it's like, without fail, people always put solutions. Like, they always put the solutions instead of the problem. So to your point, talking about closing more sales, sometimes this is one of those things that saying it, I feel like saying it is not enough. Like, too many people think they understand the world of their buyer, and they don't. They really don't understand the world of their buyer. So you're talking about closing more sales. I always love, I call it the Einstein method. Einstein said that if I had 60 minutes to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes on the solution. And I think that's the key to closing. Like, closing sales isn't so much the fancy, like, people are looking for like a fairy dust sentence that I say that just like magically closes my deal. It's like, what helps close the deal is for someone to feel like pace for pace, step by step. You've been with them, you understand them, you see them, you understand them, you're mirroring them. What you're presenting is tied to their status quo. So I love different language, same things. Like I'm obsessed with the status quo of my buyer. So when I'm looking to close a buyer, I'm literally summarizing their status quo. When we talk about status quo, I'm talking about qualifying and quantifying the cost of the status quo. So when you're talking about problems, and that's why I keep looking in the chat because people are still in there with problems, but realizing that there's quantitative problems, right? So if we're talking about inefficiencies or productivity or revenue loss, or what are we losing because we don't have community? And those are powerful. But one of my favorite movies is Tombstone, which I might be telling my age. But in Tombstone, Doc Holliday is like play the player. And like that's, so I feel like when we talk about problems, there's quantifying it, but then you got to know how to play the player. And playing the player is qualifying the cost of the status quo. So how is it impacting that individual particularly? What are their goals? And so we talk about closing more sales. I think table stakes is you have to understand how to qualify and quantify the cost of the status quo, and you lead with that. I never lead with myself. People don't care about me. They care about themselves, and I am just their reflection. So I want them to feel seen, heard, understand. I want to summarize, qualify, and quantify the cost of the status quo. And then from there, it's like assuming here's the next steps from there. So I think that's one of the tips that is very overlooked.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And it seems like as long as you're understanding what they need, how it impacts them, and as you mentioned, qualifying, quantifying the cost of status quo, you should be in alignment with you and your potential client, I should say, in hopes of closing them. But that is a lot, and it's a lot to focus on. And Katie, to your point, it's a lot to remain consistent on. So you're at speaking engagements, you're very active on social media, you're running a business, you're a father and a husband. That's a lot, and you execute it well. What is your best sales advice you can provide to those struggling with maintaining work-life balance in a sales environment?
So the first, and I don't know if this goes the wrong direction, is I don't believe in work-life balance. Because balance implies that they're on different ends, right? Like I don't even know if I could try to do this, but like if I'm balancing, right, it implies that it's on, it wasn't gonna work. It's on different ends. Like life's over here and work's over here. It doesn't work that way, right? Like try having a great work life while your home life's in the shitter. Sorry, try not to cuss. It's my bad, whatever. But try to have a great work life if home life is awful, or try having a great home life if work is awful. They're integrated, right? It's work-life integration, first of all. The idea of balance puts them on separate ends of the spectrum. It doesn't work that way. The second part of this is it's so much more about focus than it is about time, because people also make work-life balance sound like a time thing. Well, I work, I need to put just as much time over here versus here. That's also not how it works. Because first of all, let's be honest. If you're working 40 hours a day, that's 8 hours that you are at work. You don't have another 8 hours of awake time necessarily at home, right? So time isn't the thing, it's the intention. And anyone that has ever worked with me or for me knows this is my favorite word, which is intention. What is my intention, right? 1 hour of attention isn't even worth 10 minutes of intention. When I walk out this door with the intention of making my daughters laugh, how long does that take? When I walk out this door with the intention of making my daughters laugh, that's seconds, right? And it'll have a bigger impact than just sitting by them or being around them or whatever else with giving them attention. So it's the intention. Am I making my wife feel loved? Am I making sure my daughters feel cared for? That's an intention thing, right? But then the last point here is anytime people ask me this question, they say like, well, how do you do all these things? Also, let's talk about what I don't do, right? If it weren't for LinkedIn, I wouldn't be on social media. I do not have Instagram. I do not have Twitter. I do not have Snap. I do not have TikTok. I don't have any of that, right? People, y'all listening, check how much screen time you're spending on these social media apps, right? It's insane what we spend there. I don't do social media outside of LinkedIn. I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't go out to the clubs. As much as I like to tell people I go out to the clubs, I don't go out to the clubs. Like I focus on what matters to me. And that's what allows it, right? So I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in intention and setting boundaries, right? When I'm working, like my wife's home right now. I might even call her in to do this, right? But I won't put her on the spot. When I'm working, guess what she knows I'm doing? Working, right? That's also my intention. I am working right now. So when I'm done, I'm done. That's the other part, is we tend to distract ourselves so much at work that work takes longer and bleeds into life, right? You'd be shocked at how much work you can get done at work if all you did at work was work. Then go home and do the things, right, with full intention. So that's my little mini rant there on this. I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in work-life integration and full intention. And if you only had 10 minutes, but in those 10 minutes, you were going to make sure with full intention it was on your health or your family or your wife or your kids, your husband, whatever else, your life will already be better.
Mic drop. No, and that's amazing. I never really heard the perspective of, let's talk about what I don't do, because understanding context is so important. If I think back to another event, you talked about a company selling for 100 million, but did you sell in 100 million in one deal, or did you sell for 1 million a year for the next 100 years? Two very perspectives on the same deal that's already done. So understanding context is extremely important. Again, to your point, KD, intent behind what you do can take you light years ahead of if you're just doing things to do it out of emotions.
Yeah. Actually, quick call out, Cam. I want to call out what Tess said too. I have no email push on my phone. I have no Slack push on my phone. I have no notification push on my phone, right? I check those things, same idea, with intention. I've never lost a deal in my career because I didn't respond back to an email in an hour, ever in my career. I've led hundreds of salespersons. I have never had a sales org burn down because I was not in Slack and responding in 30 seconds. Turn off your notifications, mute them, delete them. And also, y'all, when you're working, guess what I don't have open right now? I don't have Slack open. I don't have my email open. I'm here with full intention, and then I'll get to it. So eliminate distractions. This is important. Don't avoid distractions. Eliminate distractions. Completely remove them. Your whole work life will change.
Amazing advice. Let's pivot on over to Liz. I'm sorry. One of my personal favorite lines from the movie Remember the Titans is "Attitude reflects leadership, Captain." Not sure if you're familiar with it. In your mentorship and mastermind class, of course you are, right, Denzel? Let's go. In your mentorship and mastermind classes, what do you teach to help people stay so positive and not get discouraged by what's in front of them?
Oh, this is powerful. I don't teach positivity per se. I think emotions are fluid and emotions should move through us. And I think one of the most damaging things is when you're trying to force an emotion you don't have, when really you should be processing the emotion you had at that time. I think one of the greatest skill sets is, what's interesting about the work that I'll speak for myself that I do, and I feel like KD might be able to relate, is like, what I love about sales, I'm about to get all like touchy feely, is like, I feel like sales champions are people champions. Like, we're human champions. Like, I feel like to be great at sales, I have to be obsessive about being a great human being, about being great at communication, about understanding the people in front of me, about managing my habits. And so when I'm trying to work with others, I feel like a lot of the work I'm doing is teaching adults how to be better adults. Like, it's people skills. It's like, how do I help you, empower you to be your best person? And so that being said, a big part of just being a great human being that's ever evolving is curiosity, right? Like I'm obsessed about Liz J. Simpson. Like, why do I do what I do? When I did that, what really was the narrative? Where did that come from? Was I in the moment? How do I shift that narrative? And so, promise I'm getting to positivity. So if I'm ever in a slump, I'm like, I love myself. I'm really good to myself. I give myself a lot of grace and compassion. I want to come back to what KD said. Like, I'm married. I have a 5-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old. I run a business. I have 7 employees. I coach hundreds of women every single day. Like, my husband is an entrepreneur. Like, my life is crazy. And I give myself grace and compassion all the time. If you're feeling something, that's your truth. Don't shame yourself for your truth. Understand why that's your truth in the moment. I'm big on journaling. I'm big on introspection. So I'm like, all right, so today, and then this is the thing about journaling, going back to habits, what KD said is when you have that habit, you start seeing patterns. Intelligence is pattern recognition, right? So intelligence comes from seeing patterns all the time. The problem is for most human beings is we don't study ourselves well enough to grow the intelligence to know our own pattern. So when I'm in negativity, I'm like, oh, you know what? You keep journaling. Girl, every time this happens, you keep being in a slump. You keep creating a narrative around that. How do you shift that? So that's my super long way of saying that the way that I empower others is that I help them be more introspective and curious about their stories, their patterns. I teach them to embrace a season. You should feel, listen, negativity is how you get my best. Like sometimes it's like the chip on my back that I go into beast mode. Like stop trying to be in fluffy butterfly rainbow mode all the time. Just know how to shift, be present with what's happening, and then bloom where you're planted. Use the emotion that you have in the moment.
It seems like you keep it 1,000%, Liz, with them in a sense of it's really stop having excuses. You teach them to have curiosity. You teach people to have accountability. And then from time to time, it's important to give yourself your flowers.
Yeah, listen, Katie said consistency. This is what we're not talking about. No one is consistently happy. No one is consistently positive all the time. So if you're going to perform consistently, you have to learn how to perform through every emotional state. You have to learn how to perform when chips are down, when chips are good. Like, so you have to know how to manage and be present with your emotions. That's how you're consistent.
Ooh, I want to challenge that real quick, Liz. I want to challenge that. Okay. Because I was with you to that last point there, because I'd be willing to bet you are consistently positive. Not always positive, but I'd be willing to bet you're consistently positive.
Okay, let's do this. I feel like as a leader, I spend a lot of time in the negativity. Like
Okay.
I obsess over what could go wrong so that I can problem solve and future cast for it. Now, we could talk about what positivity is maybe.
I think that's where we need to go, because to me, that's still not being negative. That's doing your job. Keep going.
Right. No, so for me, I spend a lot of time looking at, okay, what could be the negative outlook? What could be the negative position? Or there are times where I'm like, I'm in the dumps, but it's still like using that for fuel. So let's define positivity and consistency. Look, we got language is important. Let's define it. Let's go.
All right. So like that's where I'm going, because positivity is the realm in which you carry yourself, right? You can be positively looking at the bad. You can be positively trying to solve things. You can be positively preparing for the worst, right? Positivity is also where you carry yourself, because also too, positivity leads to you think there's a solution. Negativity generally brings you to a place that there is no solution, right? So like positivity, I do believe you can be consistently positive. I do believe that. And there actually are practices you can do to change how your brain even works. That's where gratitude comes in. Gratitude makes you a more positive person. Journaling, introspection makes you a more positive person. Exercise, reading, meditation, all those things actually can lead to more positivity, right? The point, I just want to call it, because like my interactions with you, I believe that you're generally positive. Doesn't mean that you're not finding the bad in things. So I'm just curious, right? Because I think like anyone that's worked like for me, I'm intense. They know that. I am not rainbow and butterflies and whatever else. They know that. But I also think they would put me in the positive bucket, just intense with what we do. So I'm just curious on your take there, because I do think you can be consistently positive, not consistently happy. That is very different. Happiness is a chemical release in your brain. You can't constantly be dripping dopamine and oxytocin into your body. You can't consistently be happy, but I do believe you can be consistently positive.
Yeah, I'd be curious too of you all in the chat. This is a good debate. Yeah, I think it would come back to how we see positivity. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, from my point, it's more about human beings over abundantly have more negative thoughts than they have positive thoughts, right? And I think that you can have a lifestyle and a practice of knowing what to do with those habits or those thoughts and creating new narratives for yourself. But I do think that There are people who I'm not always going to be positive. And I guess when I say positive, I'm thinking like of a state. And it could be happiness for how you're defining happiness, and knowing that you may not always see the upside, or you may not always feel great, but that's not the end all be all, but it's how you manage that state and go from there. But I think this is good. I see both. I see what you're saying. I don't disagree. I do think it's like semantics. Like, how are we defining positivity? I do like that.
No. And that's especially in sales and leadership, semantics start to matter, right? Because it does, right? It's like, am I happy? Am I positive? Am I not positive? Am I well, if I'm not positive, does that mean I'm negative? I don't think I'm negative, right? Like, people go down this whole like,
the practice. Now, if this was a sales conversation, to your point is, this is why you never assume, okay, now I'm going to do other thing. Language is oftentimes visual, and we can say the same word and see different things. And this is why in conversations too, when someone says something, it's like, oh, I'm curious, what does positivity mean to you? Right? And so if I'm going to shift it to like sales coaching, this is why you need to understand what language means to somebody, what it looks like, how they define it before you jump in. Because you can jump in and realize, oh, we're not even on the same page. We don't even define it the same. So I love it.
Because there was a study that came out, said positive-minded salespeople outsell neutral and negative salespeople by 37%. 37% higher results from being a positive-minded salesperson, right? So anyone listening on this, go buy the book Happiness Advantage by Sean Achor, or you can actually, there's a TED Talks, 20 minutes long, Sean Achor, Happiness Advantage. But what he talks about is, one, all the sciences behind positivity, but also how to garner it in yourself. And it's not about your call out on positive, or was it toxic positivity? Like, yay, like everything's great. That's not what this is. This is changing how we process things, and like how just 21 days of gratitude, wow moments, and like random acts of kindness can actually rewire the brain to see the world in a different light, which leads to more positivity, which leads to better results, which leads to better leadership. I bought my whole team the Happiness Advantage in COVID when everyone's freaking out and going through things. So Happiness Advantage, I'd recommend it to everybody on this.
Awesome. It does seem like positivity for the both of you guys is very top of mind, and it's a great debate depending upon how you define the word. But it does sound like as well you both have a really nice LinkedIn post for your audience later today, defining positivity and how it impacts everyone else. Just saying. But to the both of you here, we all know that when you're struggling, you can get unfocused and misalign on outcomes. What are your top metrics or tactics you recommend following to ensure you stay aligned on that one end goal? Katie, you want to take that one first?
Sure. Well, it starts with the end of your question is, what is your goal? Right? There's the old classic, Alice in Wonderland, not the new one with Johnny Depp. That was weird. Like, let's go back to like the original one, right? And Alice is walking through the forest, comes across the Cheshire Cat, goes, "Which way should I go?" He says, "Well, where are you trying to go?" She says, "Well, I'm not sure, really." He says, "Well, then it doesn't matter." Right? So often we don't even know where we're trying to go. We never even set that end goal, right? We have a quota, but a quota is not an end goal. That's just a number, right? Like, what is your goal? Because if you don't have a goal at the end of the day, you don't have a reason to push through when things are hard. Like, you don't. Like, you're not even trying to accomplish anything. So when you face hard things, you're not going to be willing to push through them, right? Because there's not a reason to. As human beings, like, we're survive creatures, we're not thrive creatures. Like, we do what we can to survive. And if you don't have something bigger you're shooting for, you won't push through. So the first is the goal. What are you shooting for? Then from there, you work backwards. Or what are the things in my control that if I did would lead to that goal? So I call these 3x3s. So what are the 3 things daily, weekly, and monthly that if you did would give you the best success chance for your goal? Period. Mine are on my desk right here every day. What are my daily 3x3s? What are my weekly 3x3s? What are my monthly 3x3s? Like, what are the 3 things daily that if I did would give me the best shot at my goal? Doesn't mean I'm going to get there. It just means they're going to give me my best shot. And I do everything I can to not miss those things. I build my calendar around those things. I hold myself accountable to those things, right? Because at the end of the day, if you do the right things, ideally you get to your goal. Ideally. But if you do the right things and you don't, you're still a better person because of it. And you sure as hell wouldn't have gotten there without doing those things, right? So that's where I focus. Like, what are the 3x3s? What are the 3 things daily, weekly, and monthly that if I did would give me the best chance, right? And actually, funny enough, on topic what we talked about, I don't know if people can read this. This is on like my self goal. What do we see here? My daily 3x3s, gratitude and power statements, tell family I love them, learn for 30 minutes, take notes. If I do that every day, I'm a pretty good shot at getting to my goals. Pretty damn good shot, right? And those are my self goals. And I have my wealth goals as well. What are the 3 things every day, every week, and every month? Because now, if I do this today, what can I say to myself? If I do this today, if I do my gratitude and power statements, already did, tell my family I love them, and I learn for 30 minutes, what can I tell myself at the end of the day? Good job. And we so often never even allow ourselves to recognize ourselves. I loved what Liz was saying earlier. Like, how do you say, like, I'm a big fan of Liz J. Simpson. Like, I'm my biggest fan, right? Like, you got to recognize yourself. We seek recognition from everybody else, but we never sit down and go, you know what? Good job today, KD. You did what you were supposed to do. So that's how I look at this. Is one, I know where I'm trying to go. I know my goals. I know what I'm shooting for. I've broken it down into small things. And then I'm able to check in on, am I doing the things to get me there? Because if I am, that's all I can do. But if I'm not, that's on me. And I don't deserve to get those goals. If I'm not willing to do the things necessary to get there, I don't deserve them. So that's my take on it.
No, absolutely. Set your goals and then focus on your behaviors in the day-to-day to achieve those goals, and you shall get there. Liz, what's your thoughts?
Man, that's it. That's it. It's the disciplined pursuit of less. Like, that's one of my favorite books is Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And it's focusing, it's literally that. Like, what is it that I want to achieve? Why do I want to achieve it? And then if I get rid of all the fact, what are, to KD's points, the leading indicators or the things that I can focus on that will get there? Like, what are those drivers? What excites me about this conversation and what I hope people are taking away, like, this is my first time talking to KD real time. And I'm like, it's the same principles. like reverse engineer, success leaves clues. People are following the same principles, like being disciplined about where you spend your time, being disciplined about your thinking, chunking your calendar. Like, I assign time to everything, right? And I will say, one of the things, some of these things I wish I got before I left corporate. For me, it took drowning to be like, girl, if you don't get rid of some of this fat and simplify your life. And I'm like, man, if I took some of these habits to then, I thought I needed so much more in life. And so, like, being able to say no, focusing on your goals, making sure those are the things. One of my favorite quotes is, the reason why most people don't succeed is because they're willing to give up what they want most for what they want in the moment. And so that's one of those things I hold myself accountable. It's like, girl, you over here playing. Like, do you really want that thing? Is that really the North Star? And if that's the North Star, where do you need to shift to be able to achieve that? So I agree. Like, it's discipline, pursuit of less. It's knowing those actions and it's having the habits to do it. And when you fall off track or when you have a few days, instead of like beating yourself up about it, focus again and figure out what can I, because maybe this isn't really what I want. I will say, when I was in sales, and not when I was in sales, but when I was in like direct sales, and I had sales leaders, and I remember I'd have sales managers who would ask me, like, what are you trying to achieve? Like, if you hit this commission goal, what are you trying to achieve? And I used to give like the answers that I thought people wanted to hear. Like, man, after AEP, if I hit this commission, I'm about to get this new car. And then I would find myself, that wasn't strong enough to like get me there. And so I think sometimes we create these made up materialistic goals, and it's not enough like to shift, to evolve, to go through discomfort, to change habits, because to Katie's point, like, it's really not connected to your why. So if you are missing out on goals, or you find yourself like not being disciplined in the habits, it could be an indicator that your North Star isn't really something you care enough about to change as a person or evolve.
No, that's fantastic. That actually reminds me of the quote. I forget who the actual author person, whoever it is, might be, but it's people buy things they don't need with money they don't have to impress people they don't like. What are we doing? What are we even doing? No, so that's some very valuable points, Liz. Thanks for sharing that. Now, for the both of you again, what does it mean to be a good leader, especially when a team or team members in particular are struggling? And Liz, I'll let you take this one first.
Oh man, it's so funny. We just hired 2 new full-time salespeople. They're in their second week. Big ups to them. We're training them right now, and I really feel like a coach. I'm a Chicagoan, Bulls 96. Like I am that person. I always call my teams. I'm like Bulls 96. That's what we're trying to do. Trying to pull the best of everyone on here, right? Everyone's collective skills, right? And I joke, I'm Jordan. Right? I might have some asshole tendencies here now, but I'm about to push you.
Oh.
But all jokes aside, so like for me as a leader, I feel like my job, and a friend of mine said this, and I've always used it since, is to pull the toxicity out of my company. Like whatever that could be getting in their way, that's structural things of that nature, process systems that are getting out of the way of them being able to be their best selves. A part of my call is to suck all the toxins out, right? Like that's my job. The other part for me as a leader, as far as sales leader, is I'm just trying to empower and bring the best out of people. Like I look at it as like stakeholders. Like if I empower them to be their best selves, if I help them with emotional intelligence and self-awareness, and if I help them and empower them and encourage their obsession with learning and skill set development and business acumen and like all of those things, like if I'm focused on empowering that person, I trust that in the moment, in the game, like when the clock is ticking, that they'll have the skill sets and the intelligence or the muscle memory to do their best in that time. So I feel like that's my job as a leader.
Gotcha. So really just removing the bottlenecks throughout those processes, whether it's product related, sales related, whatever it might be, and making it easier for the team. And then also at the same time, doubling down and focusing on empowerment and development of the individual reps so that, when they're in the game, you can trust them to make the correct decision without always relying upon you to reach out. No, super fire. Kevin, what's your thoughts?
Truthfully, man, not much to add there, right? Like my job as a leader is to help people accomplish more than they could without me, period. Like if I'm not helping you get more than without being with me, what am I there for? Right. So that's how I view my role as a leader, is to help you accomplish more than you could if I was not there. And whatever that means might be different, whether it's money, title, growth, career, work life, and whatever it is. I want to help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish faster, easier, or bigger than you could have if we weren't working together. That's it.
And simply put, if you're not doing that or the person's not doing that, they're not doing their job. Why are they even there?
I don't know about that point. Say that again.
And if they're not doing that, then why are they even there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess it's back to that, us knowing why are they there. For some people, they're there to do their job and they're there to make their money so they can go do whatever it is. And I'm okay with that. As long as you are, that's literally my post today was actually kind of about this a little bit of like, look, if we've agreed to what your job is and what the results need to be to keep your job and you are doing those things, that's it. Like, and if the floor for my team is like, as long as you're above 80% on a consistent basis, that's the bare minimum, and that's all you want to do, I'm okay with that. Like, do you, boo-boo? That's fine. Like, everyone expecting them to work like me or think like Liz, like that's not fair as a leader. That was a big lesson for me as a leader, was expecting my people to work and think the way that I do. That's not fair. That's not how it works. We had this phrase that I said with my leadership team weekly, if not daily. And it went like this: I am not you. You are not me. We are not them. They are not us. And we have to remember that because we project onto our people all the time the way that we would work, the way that we think, the way that we operate, what our goals are, how we like. I am not you. Like, I am not you. I have so much respect for Liz after getting to chat with her today, but I'm not Liz, and Liz isn't me. And to ever in any way try to make Liz more like me, or Liz to make would be the complete opposite of leadership, right? That's not how it works. And so I've made that mistake as leaders, trying to turn everybody into me. That's not how leaders work. Even to Liz's example, Jordan wasn't trying to make everybody into him. One, he knew they couldn't, but then two, that wasn't what he was trying to do. He was just trying to raise everybody up. He was going to get more out of you than you would do on your own without trying to make Pippen learn a fadeaway or Grant figure out how to dribble with his left hand. Not that he ever figured out how to do that, right? So like that's the last sports analogy I'll give here as we wrap. But like that's my thoughts on it, man.
Awesome. Well, Liz, KD, really appreciate all the insights you have provided with us today. I'll pass it back on over to Tess here.
Oh my gosh. Guys, so my head has nodded for a full hour in agreement to every single thing that both of you have said. I think it may fall off, but a special thank you to Liz and KD for the absolutely amazing truth bombs that just got dropped pretty much every 30 seconds for a full hour. It was such a spectacular event. I know, KD, you have to drop anytime you got to go. Please feel free to bow out. And of course, a big thank you to Cam, who expertly led this conversation. It was so seamless from start to finish. The questions were so impactful. And I would be remiss if I didn't hold a special thank you to our friends over at Rocket Reach for sponsoring today's event. Without them, the brain trust of this event literally would not exist. So we are so lucky and indebted to them for putting together this event. One final thing on today's event, special request from Sales Hacker, guys. We're running a confidential survey on the state of the sales stack. Right now, the survey takes 15 minutes. You can tell us what you really think. As we said, it's fully confidential, and completed surveys are eligible to receive a $500 gift card. Yep, $500. Your response is anonymous, and you can provide your email address at the end of the survey for a chance to win. We're going to be doing the drawing on or before October 10th, and the winner is going to be announced on the 15th of October. So we're going to ask you guys to complete it. I've got the link coming. Just 1 second. Got to make sure I have multiple screens here. Savannah's got me, but just reiterating it in the chat. You guys can please take a look at it. Maybe do it in the next, 5-10 minutes after this event. Guys, thank you so much to everybody. We're going to let you guys have 3 minutes back of your life. We'll see you guys at the next one.
Later, y'all. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you
Thank you all.